David's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning, just like it did every single day. He reached over and turned it off before it could wake up his daughter in the next room. The apartment was quiet and dark, and for just a moment he let himself stay under the warm blanket, but only for a moment. Being a single dad meant there was no time to waste. He got up and walked to the bathroom, looking at himself in the mirror. 34 years old, and he looked tired. Really tired. The kind of tired that comes from working 2 jobs and raising a kid on your own. He splashed cold water on his face and tried to shake off the exhaustion. Today was different. Today mattered more than most days. He made breakfast quietly, scrambling some eggs and toasting bread. The kitchen was small, just like everything else in their 2-bedroom apartment. But it was home. It was what he could afford, and he made sure it was clean and warm for his little girl. That's all that mattered to him. "Daddy?" A small voice came from the hallway. His 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, stood there rubbing her eyes, her hair messy from sleep. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the little stars on them. "Hey, sweetie, you're up early," David said, smiling at her. "Come here, breakfast is ready." Sophie climbed onto the chair and started eating her eggs. She looked at her dad and noticed something different. "Daddy, why are you wearing that fancy suit?" David looked down at his navy blue suit. It was his only good suit, the one he bought 5 years ago for a wedding. He'd been saving it, taking care of it, keeping it perfect for a moment just like this. "I have a really important meeting today, Soph," he said, sitting down next to her. "Remember how Daddy's been looking for a better job?" Sophie nodded, her mouth full of toast. "Well, today I have an interview. It's at a really big company, and if I get this job, things are going to get better for us. We might even be able to move to a bigger place. Maybe get you that bike you wanted." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really, the purple one?" "Maybe," David said, not wanting to promise too much. He'd learned the hard way not to get his hopes up. Life had a way of knocking him down just when he thought things might improve. 3 years ago, his wife left them, just packed her bags one day and said she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't handle being a mom, couldn't handle the responsibility. She wanted to be free, she said. David never heard from her again. Since then, it had been just him and Sophie against the world. He worked as a delivery driver during the day and did freelance bookkeeping at night after Sophie went to bed. The money was never enough. They got by, but just barely. Every month was a struggle to pay rent, buy groceries, keep the lights on. He couldn't remember the last time he bought something for himself. But this job, this interview today, it could change everything. It was for a project manager position at a tech company downtown. The salary was 3 times what he made now. It had benefits, health insurance, paid time off, things he'd almost forgotten existed. He'd applied 6 weeks ago, not really expecting to hear back. But they called him. They wanted to meet him, and he'd prepared for this interview like his life depended on it, because in a way it did. "Finish up your breakfast, Soph. We need to get you to school," David said, checking the time on the microwave. It was already 6:15. They went through their morning routine. Sophie brushed her teeth while David packed her lunch. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, some crackers, and a juice box. Nothing fancy, but it was nutritious and it was made with love. He helped her get dressed in her school uniform and brushed her hair, tying it back in a ponytail the way she liked it. At 7 o'clock, they were in his old Honda, driving through the morning traffic. The car was 15 years old and had over 200,000 miles on it, but it still ran. That's all David needed. Sophie sang along to the radio in the back seat, and David found himself smiling despite his nerves. When they pulled up to the school, David walked Sophie to the entrance like he always did. He knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "You're going to do great today, Daddy," Sophie said before he could say anything. "I know you will. You're the best daddy in the whole world." David felt his throat get tight. Kids have this way of saying exactly what you need to hear at exactly the right time. He hugged her close, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you so much, Soph. Be good today, okay?" "I love you too, Daddy. Good luck." He watched her run inside, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders, and then he got back in his car. The interview was at 10 o'clock downtown. It was only 7:30, but David knew the traffic could be unpredictable. He also wanted to get there early, find parking, maybe sit somewhere and review his notes one more time. The drive downtown took 40 minutes. The city was already busy, people rushing everywhere, living their lives. David found a parking garage near the building where his interview would be. The sign said $10 for all-day parking. He hesitated for just a second. $10 was a lot of money for him, but he paid it. This was an investment in his future. He walked 2 blocks to a small coffee shop across the street from the tall glass building where the company had their offices. Through the windows he could see the lobby, modern and sleek with marble floors and a huge desk in the center. This was the kind of place where successful people worked. Could he be one of those people? Could he actually get this job? David ordered a small black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu, and sat at a table by the window. He pulled out his phone and reviewed the notes he'd made. He'd researched the company for hours, learned everything about what they did, who ran it, what their values were. He'd practiced answers to common interview questions until he could say them in his sleep. He knew his resume inside and out, but now, sitting here with 30 minutes until his interview, doubt started creeping in. What if he wasn't good enough? What if they took one look at him and knew he didn't belong in their fancy office? What if there were 100 other candidates who were smarter, more qualified, more polished than him? He pushed those thoughts away. No, he'd worked too hard for this. He'd sacrificed too much. He deserved this chance. Sophie deserved a father who could provide for her, who didn't have to work himself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. David looked at his phone. 9:45. It was time. He stood up, threw away his empty coffee cup, and checked his reflection in the shop window. The suit looked good. His tie was straight. He took a deep breath. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "For Sophie, you can do this." He stepped out onto the sidewalk and started walking toward the building. The morning sun was warm on his face. People rushed past him in both directions, everyone in their own world. David kept his eyes on the glass tower ahead of him, getting closer with each step. His heart was pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. He reached the entrance and pulled open the heavy glass door. Cold air conditioning hit him as he stepped into the lobby. The marble floor gleamed under the bright lights. A security desk sat in the center, and elevators lined the back wall. David walked toward the reception area, ready to check in for his interview. The woman at the desk looked up at him with a professional smile. "Good morning, how can I help you?" she asked. "Hi, I'm David Chen. I have a 10 o'clock interview with..." That's when everything changed. The floor beneath his feet started to move. At first, David thought maybe he was dizzy from nerves. But then the floor moved again, harder this time. The woman at the reception desk looked confused, her professional smile fading. Then the whole building started to shake. It wasn't gentle. It was violent and terrifying. The ground rolled under David's feet like waves on the ocean. He stumbled and grabbed onto the edge of the reception desk, trying to keep his balance. The woman behind the desk screamed. All around him, people started shouting. The overhead lights swayed wildly. Somewhere above, glass shattered with a sound like 1,000 plates breaking at once. Pieces of ceiling tiles crashed down onto the marble floor. The building groaned, a deep and horrible sound that David felt in his bones. This was an earthquake, a big one. "Get under something," someone yelled. David's military training kicked in. Years ago, before Sophie was born, he'd served in the Marines. They'd taught him to stay calm in emergencies, to think clearly when everyone else panicked. He dropped to the ground and crawled under the reception desk, pulling the receptionist down with him. "Cover your head," he shouted over the noise. She curled up next to him, her hands over her head, crying. The shaking seemed to go on forever. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the lobby into darkness. Emergency lights came on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. David counted the seconds in his head. 20, 30, 40. The shaking was starting to ease up. 45 seconds. Then finally it stopped. The building settled with a few more creaks and groans. For a moment everything was silent except for the sound of the fire alarm and people crying. "Is everyone okay?" David called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. He crawled out from under the desk and stood up carefully, checking himself. No injuries, just some dust on his suit. The receptionist was shaking but unhurt. The lobby looked like a war zone. Ceiling tiles covered the floor. The big glass windows near the entrance had spiderweb cracks running through them. Several people were scattered around the space, some still hiding under furniture, others standing and looking around in shock. That's when David heard it. A woman's voice, weak and scared, coming from somewhere to his left. "Help, please, someone help me." David moved toward the voice, stepping carefully over debris. Other people in the lobby were pulling out their phones trying to call for help, but he could hear them saying the lines were dead. He followed the voice to where the main reception area had been. The large desk had partially collapsed, and beneath it, he could see someone trapped. He dropped to his knees and looked underneath. A woman was pinned there. A woman probably in her late 50s with short gray hair and a very expensive-looking business suit. Part of the heavy desk had fallen across her legs. Blood was running down her face from a cut on her forehead. "I've got you," David said, his voice calm and steady. "My name is David. Can you tell me your name?" "Victoria," the woman said, her voice shaking with pain. "Victoria Winters, my legs. I can't move my legs." "Okay, Victoria. I'm going to get you out of here. But first I need to check if you're hurt anywhere else. Can you wiggle your toes?" Victoria closed her eyes and concentrated. "Yes, I can feel them. It hurts, but I can feel them. That was good." That meant her spine probably wasn't damaged. David looked at the desk. It was solid wood and metal, probably weighed 300 pounds. He couldn't lift it alone, not without risking dropping it on her. "Hey," he called out to the lobby. "I need help over here. There's someone trapped." 2 men came over, both looking scared but willing to help. One was young, maybe 25, in jeans and a t-shirt. The other was older, maybe 50, in a security guard uniform. "On 3, we're going to lift this desk," David said, positioning himself at one end. "You 2 take that side. We lift together, straight up. Don't drop it. Ready?" The men nodded. Victoria looked up at them with frightened eyes. "It's going to be okay," David told her. "When we lift, I need you to pull yourself out as fast as you can." "Can you do that?" "I think so," Victoria said. 1, 2, 3. The 3 men lifted with everything they had. The desk rose slowly. Victoria gritted her teeth and dragged herself out from under it, crying out in pain. As soon as she was clear, they lowered the desk back down. David immediately went to Victoria's side. Her legs were bleeding and one ankle was twisted at an ugly angle, definitely broken. But she was free. The young guy in the t-shirt looked pale and like he might throw up. The security guard was breathing hard. "Thank you," Victoria gasped. "Thank you so much." David pulled off his suit jacket and folded it, putting it under her head. Then he took off his tie. His expensive tie, the one he'd bought specifically for this interview. He wrapped it around Victoria's arm where a deep gash was bleeding badly, using it as a makeshift bandage and applying pressure. "Has anyone gotten through to 911? He called out to the lobby. "Lines are jammed," someone called back. "I can't get through." David wasn't surprised. In a disaster like this, everyone in the city would be trying to call emergency services at the same time. He looked around the lobby. About 15 people were there. Most of them were okay, but a few had cuts and bruises. One woman was cradling her arm like it might be broken. "Listen up, everyone." David's voice had the command tone from his military days. People stopped what they were doing and looked at him. "We need to stay calm. Help is coming, but it might take a while. If anyone has first aid training, I need you over here. Everyone else, check the people around you. Make sure no one is seriously injured. Do not try to leave the building yet. We don't know if it's safe outside, and there might be aftershocks." People started moving, helping each other. The young guy who'd helped lift the desk ran to get a first aid kit from the security station. An older woman came over and said she was a retired nurse. Together, she and David started treating Victoria's injuries properly. "You're good at this," Victoria said through gritted teeth as David worked. The nurse was wrapping her ankle. "Are you a paramedic?" "No," David said. "I was in the Marines a long time ago. Got some medical training there." "What are you doing in this building?" Victoria asked. She was clearly trying to distract herself from the pain by talking. David almost laughed, but it came out more like a sad sigh. "I had a job interview. At 10 o'clock. Guess I'm going to miss it now." Victoria looked at him strangely, but didn't say anything. She was starting to look pale, and David recognized the signs of shock setting in. He elevated her legs and made sure she stayed warm using jackets that other people donated. The building shook again, a smaller aftershock, but still strong enough to make everyone freeze in fear. Dust fell from the damaged ceiling. A few more tiles came down. People screamed. David held Victoria steady, covering her with his body until the shaking stopped. "Is it over?" Victoria whispered. "That was an aftershock," David said. "There'll probably be more, but we're okay. We're going to be okay." Time became weird after that. David wasn't sure if 10 minutes passed or 30. He kept checking Victoria's pulse, making sure she stayed conscious. He helped other people with their injuries. He kept everyone calm when more aftershocks hit. The security guard found some water bottles, and David made sure the injured people got to drink first. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw messages from Sophie's school. All students safe. Building secure. Do not attempt to pick up children until given the all clear. Relief flooded through him. Sophie was okay. That's all that mattered. But there were other notifications, too. Missed calls from the company he was supposed to interview with, voicemails. He played one of them. A woman's irritated voice saying, "Mr. Chen, you missed your 10 o'clock appointment. We had several candidates to see today, and your lack of professionalism is disappointing. Please don't bother rescheduling." David closed his eyes. His one chance. His one shot at making life better for him and Sophie. Gone. Not because he'd overslept or forgotten or messed up, but because he'd stayed to help people. Because he couldn't walk away from someone who needed him. "You okay?" Victoria asked. She'd seen his face. "Yeah," David lied. "I'm fine." Finally, after what felt like forever, firefighters arrived. They came through the damaged lobby in their heavy gear, bringing equipment and medical supplies. Paramedics followed right behind them. David felt his shoulders sag with relief. Real help had arrived. "Who's in charge here?" one of the firefighters called out. "That guy," several people said, pointing at David. The firefighter came over to David. "Sir, can you give me a rundown of the situation?" David quickly explained how many people were in the lobby who was injured and how badly, and what they'd done to help each other. The firefighter nodded, impressed. "You did good work here," he said. "Probably saved some lives by keeping everyone calm." Paramedics loaded Victoria onto a stretcher. She grabbed David's hand before they took her away. Her grip surprisingly strong. "What did you say your name was?" she asked. "David. David Chen." "Thank you, David Chen," Victoria said, looking him straight in the eyes. "You saved my life." Then they wheeled her away out through the damaged lobby to a waiting ambulance outside. David watched her go, then looked down at himself. His suit was torn and covered in dust and blood. His shirt was untucked. His tie was gone, used as a bandage. He looked like he'd been in a war. The firefighters cleared everyone out of the building. Outside, the street looked like something from a disaster movie. Broken glass covered the sidewalks. Car alarms were going off everywhere. People stood in groups, some crying, some on their phones. Everyone looking scared and confused. Buildings up and down the block had visible damage. Cracks in walls, broken windows. One storefront had completely collapsed. David stood there on the sidewalk, not sure what to do next. His car was in the parking garage 2 blocks away, but emergency workers were telling everyone to stay out of structures until they could be inspected for safety. So he just stood there, watching ambulances come and go, watching people reunite with loved ones, watching the chaos slowly turn into organized recovery efforts. His phone rang. "Sophie's school, Mr. Chen? This is Principal Rodriguez. I wanted to let you know Sophie is safe. We've moved all the children to the playground, which our engineer says is the safest place. The building has some damage, but nothing structural. Are you able to pick her up?" "I'll be there as soon as I can," David said. "The streets are pretty blocked up, but I'm on my way. Take your time and be safe. Sophie's doing fine. She's actually helping comfort some of the younger kids who are scared. You've raised a good girl, Mr. Chen." David felt his eyes burn with tears. His daughter, his sweet, brave daughter. He needed to get to her. The walk to the parking garage took 20 minutes because he had to go around several blocked streets. The garage had cracks in its concrete walls but was still standing. His old Honda sat there waiting for him, covered in dust that had fallen through the levels above but otherwise fine. He'd never been so happy to see that beat-up car. The drive to Sophie's school normally took 15 minutes. Today it took an hour. Streets were closed. Traffic lights were out. Police were directing cars at intersections. David's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. All he could think about was getting to Sophie. When he finally pulled up to the school, he saw all the children sitting on the playground with their teachers. Parents were arriving one by one to pick up their kids. David spotted Sophie sitting with her class, her teacher reading them a story, probably trying to keep them distracted. The moment Sophie saw his car, she jumped up and ran. "Daddy," she screamed, and threw herself into his arms when he got out of the car. David held her so tight, breathing in that strawberry shampoo smell, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. "I was so scared," Sophie said into his shoulder. "The ground was shaking and things were falling and I didn't know where you were." "I know, baby. I know, but we're okay. We're both okay." David pulled back and looked at her face, checking for any sign of injury. "Not a scratch." "You're being so brave. The principal told me you were helping the little kids." Sophie nodded. "They were crying, so I held their hands and told them it would be okay. Like you always tell me when I'm scared." David's heart felt like it might burst. How did he get so lucky to have this kid? They got in the car and headed home. The radio was full of news about the earthquake. Magnitude 6.8, the biggest quake to hit the city in 50 years. Buildings damaged across downtown. Injuries in the hundreds, but thankfully, so far, only a few deaths. The newscasters kept saying it was a miracle it wasn't worse. Their apartment building looked okay from the outside. A few cracks in the exterior walls, but nothing that looked dangerous. Inside their unit, things were a mess. Books had fallen off shelves. Dishes had crashed out of cabinets. Sophie's toys were scattered everywhere, but the structure was sound. They still had power and water. They were lucky. David spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning up while Sophie sat on the couch, quieter than usual. He could tell she was processing what happened. That night he made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese from a box, and they ate together watching cartoons. He let her stay up past her bedtime because normal rules didn't seem to matter today. When he finally tucked her into bed, Sophie grabbed his hand. "Daddy, what about your interview?" David had been trying not to think about it. "I missed it, sweetheart. I was helping people who got hurt in the earthquake. Will they give you another chance?" "I don't think so, Soph." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "So we can't get the bigger apartment? I can't get my bike?" David's heart broke. "Not right now. But hey, we're okay. We're healthy and safe and we have each other. That's what matters most, right?" Sophie nodded, but she still looked sad. After she fell asleep, David went to his own room and sat on the edge of his bed. He pulled out his phone and listened to the voicemails from the company again. Each one was more irritated than the last. The final one said, "Mr. Chen, we're marking you as a no-show. Don't contact us again." He wanted to be angry. He wanted to call them back and explain what happened. Tell them he'd been saving lives while they sat in their comfortable office judging him for not showing up. But what was the point? They'd already decided he was unprofessional. They'd already moved on to other candidates. David changed out of his ruined suit and threw it in the trash. There was no saving it. $200 down the drain. Money he didn't have. He climbed into bed but couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the day. The moment the ground started shaking, Victoria trapped under that desk. The blood. The fear in everyone's eyes. The look on Sophie's face when he told her about the job. He must have eventually fallen asleep because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through his window and his phone was ringing. Unknown number. Probably a spam call. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Is this David Chen?" a woman's voice asked. Professional, formal. "Yes, this is David. Mr. Chen, my name is Jennifer Park. I'm the executive assistant to Victoria Winters. Ms. Winters is still at City General Hospital recovering from her injuries, but she insisted that I track you down and call you immediately. Do you have a moment to speak with her?" David sat up straight in bed. "Victoria, the woman from the lobby." Yes, of course." There was a moment of silence, some rustling, and then Victoria's voice came through the phone. She sounded tired and her words were a bit slurred, probably from pain medication, but she was definitely awake and alert. David Chen?" "Yes, ma'am." "This is David. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Victoria said with a weak laugh. "But I'm alive because of you. The doctor said if I'd been trapped much longer, I could have lost my legs or bled out from that cut on my arm. You saved my life." "I just did what anyone would do," David said, feeling uncomfortable with the praise. "No," Victoria said firmly. "Most people would have panicked or run away or only thought about themselves. You stayed calm. You helped not just me, but everyone in that lobby. The firefighters told me you basically managed the whole emergency response until they arrived. That takes character, David. Real character." David didn't know what to say. "I'm just glad you're okay. David, I need to ask you something. Yesterday morning, you told me you were in that building for a job interview. Is that right?" "Yes, ma'am. What company were you interviewing with?" David hesitated. This felt embarrassing. Winters Global Consulting. It was for a project manager position. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Victoria spoke and her voice had changed. It was stronger now, more focused. David, do you know who I am? I mean, beyond just my name? I saw your name tag in the lobby. Victoria Winters. But honestly, everything was so crazy I didn't really process it. I'm the CEO of Winters Global Consulting, Victoria said. The company where you had your interview. Or rather, where you were supposed to have your interview before you stayed behind to save my life and the lives of my employees. David felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The woman he'd saved was the CEO, the head of the entire company, and he'd missed his interview with her company to save her. I had Jennifer pull your application file this morning, Victoria continued. I've been looking it over. Former Marine honorable discharge, 6 years of project management experience, certifications in Agile and PMP, excellent references from your previous employers, single father working 2 jobs to support your daughter. David, why did someone with your qualifications apply for a mid-level project manager role? Because I need the work, David said honestly. I need a stable job with benefits. I need to provide for my daughter. I've spent 30 years building this company, Victoria said. I've interviewed thousands of people. I've seen every type of candidate you can imagine. The smooth talkers who can't back it up. The brilliant minds who can't work with others. The hard workers who lack integrity. Yesterday, in the worst moment of my life, I saw who you really are. You're calm under pressure. You're a natural leader. You put others before yourself. You have exactly the kind of character I look for in my senior people. David's heart was pounding. Ms. Winters, I don't understand. I'm going to be in this hospital for a few more days, Victoria said. But I want you to come to my office on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Not for an interview. We're past that. I want to discuss your position with my company. A real position, not the one you applied for. I don't know what to say, David managed. Say you'll be there, Victoria said. And David? Wear whatever you want. After what you did yesterday, you've already proven everything you need to PR. The weekend felt like it lasted forever. David tried to keep himself busy, but his mind kept wandering to Monday morning. What kind of position was Victoria talking about? Would it really be better than what he'd originally applied for? Part of him worried this was all too good to be true, that he'd show up and find out there'd been some kind of mistake. Saturday morning, he took Sophie to the park. The city was still recovering from the earthquake. Workers were everywhere, inspecting buildings, clearing debris, fixing broken traffic lights. But life was starting to return to normal. Kids played on the swings while their parents sat on benches, everyone just grateful to be alive and together. Daddy, push me higher, Sophie called from the swing. David pushed her, watching her hair fly out behind her as she laughed. This was what it was all about. These moments. This happiness. If he got this job, there would be so many more moments like this. He wouldn't be exhausted all the time. He wouldn't have to choose between paying the electric bill or buying Sophie new shoes. They could just live, really live, instead of barely surviving. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, he'd been desperate and running on empty. Then the earthquake hit. Then he'd helped Victoria, and now his whole life might be about to change. It felt like fate, like the universe had been paying attention after all. Sunday, he took Sophie to the library. It was one of their favorite free activities. While Sophie picked out books about dinosaurs and princesses, David sat at a computer and looked up Winters Global Consulting. He'd done basic research before his original interview, but now he went deeper. The company was bigger than he'd realized. They had offices in 12 cities. Over 2,000 employees. They did consulting work for major corporations, helping them with technology implementation and business transformation. Victoria Winters had founded the company 28 years ago, with just 3 employees. Now it was worth millions. David found articles about Victoria. She'd been featured in business magazines, named one of the top female CEOs in the country. She was known for being tough but fair, for building a company culture that valued integrity and results equally. One article quoted her saying, "I'd rather hire someone with character and train them in skills than hire someone with skills who lacks character." Reading that made David feel a little better. Maybe this wasn't just about gratitude. Maybe Victoria really did see something in him. Monday morning came. David woke up even earlier than usual, too nervous to sleep. He showered and stood in front of his closet trying to figure out what to wear. Victoria had said wear whatever he wanted, but that felt like a test somehow. He couldn't wear a suit, his only one was destroyed. He settled on his nicest pair of khaki pants and a button-down shirt. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and professional. He got Sophie ready for school, made her breakfast, packed her lunch. Everything normal, but he must have seemed distracted because Sophie noticed. "You're nervous about your meeting," she said, not asking, just stating it as fact. "Yeah, I am," David admitted. "It's a really big deal. You'll do great, Daddy. You always do." David drove Sophie to school, hugged her goodbye, and then headed downtown. The building where he'd had his original interview looked different now. There was construction equipment outside. Workers were replacing broken windows. Yellow caution tape blocked off parts of the sidewalk. But the building was open for business. David went through security, showed his ID, and got a visitor badge. The security guard looked at him and said, "You're the guy from the earthquake, the one who helped everyone?" Yeah," David said, surprised. "Man, everyone's been talking about you. You're a hero around here." David felt his face get hot. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who did what needed to be done. He took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Victoria's office was located. The elevator was slow, giving him plenty of time to get even more nervous. When the doors opened, he stepped into a reception area that was elegant, but not stuffy. Modern furniture, lots of natural light, plants in the corners. A young woman sat at the desk and she smiled when she saw him. "You must be David Chen. I'm Jennifer Park. We spoke on the phone. Ms. Winters is expecting you." Jennifer led him down a hallway lined with conference rooms and offices. People were working at their desks, focused and busy. This was the kind of environment David had dreamed of working in. Professional, purposeful, a place where you could build a real career. They stopped at a large office at the end of the hall. Jennifer knocked and then opened the door. "Ms. Winters, David Chen is here." Victoria's office was impressive but not pretentious. Big windows overlooking the city. Bookshelves filled with business books and family photos. A large desk with 2 comfortable chairs facing it. And behind the desk, in a wheelchair with her leg in a cast, sat Victoria. She looked tired but alert. The bandage on her forehead was smaller now. She smiled when she saw David and it reached her eyes. "David, thank you for coming. Please sit down." David sat in one of the chairs, his hands folded in his lap. He felt like he was back in the Marines, sitting in front of his commanding officer. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better each day," Victoria said. "Broken ankle, some torn ligaments, 15 stitches in my head and bruises everywhere. But I'm alive, thanks to you. I was just—" "Don't say you were just doing what anyone would do," Victoria interrupted gently, "because we both know that's not true. I've talked to the other people who were in that lobby. They all said the same thing. You were the one who kept everyone calm. You were the one who organized the response. You were the one who probably prevented panic that could have gotten people hurt worse. Leadership isn't about having a title, David. It's about what you do when no one's looking and there's no reward for doing the right thing." David didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Victoria pulled a folder from her desk. "I've spent the weekend reading your file and making some calls. I talked to your previous employers. Every single one of them said you were one of their best employees. Reliable, honest, good with people. One of them said letting you go during their downsizing was the biggest mistake they'd made. I also called your references. Again, glowing reviews." She paused and looked at him directly. "Then I did something you might think is invasive, but I'm going to be honest about it. I had Jennifer research your personal situation. I know your wife left 3 years ago. I know you've been raising Sophie alone. I know you work for a delivery company during the day and do freelance bookkeeping at night. I know you applied for this job because you're barely keeping your head above water financially." David felt exposed, vulnerable. But Victoria's expression wasn't judgmental. It was sympathetic. "I also know," she continued, "that despite all that struggle, your daughter's teachers say she's one of the happiest, most well-adjusted kids in her class. That tells me you're not just a good employee. You're a good father. And if you can manage all of that while working 2 jobs and barely sleeping, I can only imagine what you could do with proper resources and support." Victoria pushed the folder toward him. "Open it." David opened the folder. Inside was a job offer letter. He started reading and his eyes went wide. This wasn't for the project manager position he'd applied for. This was for senior director of operations. The salary was listed at the bottom. It was 4 times what he made now. 4 times. There was full health insurance, dental, vision, a retirement plan with company matching, 4 weeks of paid vacation, and something called college fund benefit that he didn't even understand. "I don't understand," David said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is a director position. I've never been a director." "You've been managing complex operations for years," Victoria said. "You just haven't had the title or the paycheck." "David, I've been running this company for almost 3 decades. I'm 59 years old. I've built something I'm proud of, but I'm getting tired. In the next 5 to 10 years, I want to transition into a more advisory role and eventually retire. To do that, I need people I can trust in key leadership positions. People with integrity. People who put the mission before themselves." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That earthquake was the scariest moment of my life. I thought I was going to die. And in that moment, a stranger stayed to help me instead of saving himself. You gave up what you thought was your one shot at a better life to make sure I survived. That's exactly the kind of person I want leading my company." David felt overwhelmed. "Ms. Winters, I'm honored, but I've never done this kind of work. I don't want to let you down." "You won't," Victoria said with confidence. "And you won't be alone. I'm going to mentor you personally. You'll shadow me for the first 6 months. Learn how everything works at the executive level. Yes, there will be a learning curve. Yes, you'll make mistakes. Everyone does. But I believe in you, David. More importantly, I trust you. In my experience, trust is worth more than experience." David looked down at the offer letter again. This was real. This was actually happening. His hands were shaking. "There's one more thing," Victoria said. "That college fund benefit you're looking at. We have a program where the company contributes $5,000 a year to a college savings account for each employee's child. By the time Sophie is ready for call." David's first day at Winters Global Consulting was overwhelming in the best possible way. Jennifer gave him a tour of the office, introducing him to what felt like 100 people. Everyone was friendly, but he could tll they were curious about him. He was the guy from the earthquake. The one who helped the CEO. Some people looked at him with respect, others with skepticism, probably wondering if he'd actually earned this position or if it was just favoritism. He tried not to think about that. He had a job to do, and he was going to prove he deserved to be there. Victoria had been serious about mentoring him. For the first month, David shadowed her to every meeting, every conference call, every strategic planning session. She explained her decision-making process, introduced him to key clients, taught him how to read financial reports and project forecasts. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but David absorbed everything. In the evenings, after picking up Sophie from her new after-school program, they'd have dinner together and David would tell her about his day. Sophie would tell him about her day too, about her friends and her homework and the art project she was working on. Their apartment was still small, but it felt different now. It felt lighter. The constant weight of financial stress was gone. After 2 months, David got his first real paycheck from the new job. He stared at the direct deposit notification on his phone, unable to believe the number. This was more money than he used to make in 4 months at his old jobs. He paid all his bills in advance for the next 3 months. He took Sophie to a real restaurant, not fast food, where they sat at a table with cloth napkins and she ordered chicken fingers that came with fancy fries. The look on her face made everything worth it. "Daddy, can we do this again?" Sophie asked, her mouth full of food. "Yes, sweetie," David said, smiling so wide his cheeks hurt. "We can do this lots of times." The next week, they went to the bike shop. Sophie picked out a purple bike with streamers on the handlebars and a bell that rang when you squeezed it. David didn't even look at the price tag. He just paid for it along with a helmet and knee pads. That afternoon, he taught her to ride it in the park, running alongside her while she wobbled and laughed and eventually found her balance. Watching her ride off on her own, confident and happy, David felt something break open in his chest. Pure joy. At work, Victoria gradually gave him more responsibility. At first, he was just observing. Then he was contributing to discussions. Then he was leading small projects. Then bigger ones. 6 months in, Victoria had him present to a major client about a system implementation plan. David was terrified. But he prepared thoroughly and delivered a presentation that impressed everyone in the room. The client signed a $2 million contract, see? Victoria said afterward. I told you that you could do this. But it wasn't just about work. Victoria became something like family. She invited David and Sophie to her house for Sunday dinners. Her own children were grown with kids of their own, and she seemed to enjoy having Sophie around. Sophie called her Miss Victoria and would tell her all about school and her bike and her friends. Victoria listened like every word was important. One Sunday, while Sophie played with Victoria's grandkids in the backyard, Victoria and David sat on the porch drinking coffee. "You've exceeded every expectation I had," Victoria said, "and my expectations were already high." "I'm just trying not to let you down," David said. "You couldn't if you tried," Victoria said. "But I want to talk to you about something. I'm thinking about the future of the company. In 3 years, I want to step back from day-to-day operations and move into a chairman role. That means I need a president who can run things. I have a few internal candidates I'm considering, and David, you're one of them." David nearly dropped his coffee cup. "President?" "Victoria, I've only been here 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've proven yourself over and over. I'm not saying the job is yours tomorrow. I'm saying that if you keep growing the way you have been, in 3 years you'll be ready. Think about it." David did think about it. Late at night, after Sophie was asleep, he'd sit in his small living room and try to wrap his head around how much his life had changed. A year ago, he'd been barely surviving. Now he was being considered for president of a multi-million-dollar company. It didn't seem real. But he was learning that sometimes life can turn on a single moment. Sometimes one choice, one action, one decision to help someone instead of walking away can change everything. A year after he started at Winters Global, David moved into a bigger apartment. 2 real bedrooms, an actual living room, a kitchen with new appliances. Sophie got to decorate her own room however she wanted. She picked out purple curtains to match her bike and put up posters of her favorite singers. She had space for all her toys and books. She had friends over for sleepovers. David would stand in the doorway of her room sometimes, watching her play or read or just exist in this space that was hers. And he'd remember those days when he wasn't sure he could keep a roof over their heads at all. The contrast was almost painful. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Sophie asked one night, catching him in her doorway. "Happy tears, Soph," he said. "I'm just really grateful for everything we have." Sophie got up and hugged him. She was 8 now, getting so big. "Me too, Daddy. We're really lucky." "We are," David agreed. But he knew it wasn't just luck. It was the choice he'd made to stay in that lobby, to help Victoria, to put someone else's needs before his own fear and desperation. At work, David continued to grow. Victoria taught him everything she knew about running a business. How to build relationships with clients, how to manage difficult employees, how to make tough financial decisions, how to balance profit with integrity. He made mistakes, sure. Everyone does. But he learned from each one, and Victoria was patient with him, the way someone had once been patient with her. 2 years in, David was promoted to Vice President of Operations. He now oversaw a team of 40 people. He'd become known in the company for being fair but demanding, for expecting excellence but supporting his team when they fell short. People wanted to work for him because they knew he cared about them as people, not just as employees. Sophie was thriving too. She was 9 now, doing well in school, playing soccer on the weekends, taking piano lessons. She had the childhood David had always wanted to give her but never thought he'd be able to afford. She wasn't worried about money. She wasn't scared about the future. She was just a kid being a kid the way it should be. One day, David got a call from Sophie's school. His heart jumped into his throat, old panic rising up. Was she hurt? Sick? But the principal was calling with good news. Sophie had been selected for the gifted program. She was testing above grade level in reading and math. They wanted to know if David would approve her enrollment in accelerated classes. "Yes," David said, crying for what felt like the 1,000th time since his life had changed. "Absolutely yes." That night, he took Sophie out for ice cream to celebrate. They sat at a little table outside the shop, eating sundaes as the sun set. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" Sophie said, swirling her spoon in her ice cream. "Of course, sweetie. Do you remember that day when the earthquake happened? When you missed your interview?" "I'll never forget it," David said. "I was so sad that day," Sophie admitted. "I thought we'd never get the bigger apartment or my bike or anything. But now we have all of it and more. How did that happen?" David thought about how to explain it in a way a 9-year-old would understand. Sometimes when we help other people, even when it costs us something, good things come back to us. Not always right away and not always in the way we expect. But kindness matters, Soph. Doing the right thing matters. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Sophie nodded seriously, thinking about this. So you helped Miss Victoria and then she helped us? Yeah, David said. Pretty much exactly that. I want to be like that when I grow up, Sophie said. I want to help people even when it's hard. David reached across the table and took her hand. You already are like that, kiddo. You already are. 3 years after the earthquake, exactly as she'd planned, Victoria stepped back from running the daily operations of Winters Global Consulting. The board of directors met to decide who would become the new president. David sat in the conference room with the other candidates, his heart pounding. He'd worked so hard. He'd proven himself over and over, but he knew any of them could get the job. They were all qualified, all capable. When Victoria announced that David would be the new president, the room erupted in applause. Some of it was probably just polite, but David saw genuine respect on most faces. He'd earned this. It wasn't just about saving Victoria's life anymore. It was about everything he'd done since then. After the meeting, Victoria pulled him aside. She was using a cane now, her ankle having never fully healed from the earthquake, but she was still as sharp and commanding as ever. Congratulations, Mr. President, she said with a smile. I couldn't have done this without you, David said. No, you couldn't have, Victoria agreed. But I couldn't have built this company without the person who believed in me either. That's how it works, David. We lift each other up. And now it's your turn to lift up the next person who needs it. David understood. He was already looking for that person. Someone with potential who just needed a che.